Welcome to the Sex, God, and Chaos podcast, a conversation built to help you address the mess, connect the dots, and defeat addiction. Doing your work matters because if nothing changes, then nothing changes. Life is tough and we're here to help. I'm your host, Ben Derrick, and as always, I'll be joined by Roan Hunter. Let's jump right in. Eva, back for another episode.
Well, hey, I'm glad to be back.
How about that, right?
I know, right?
You show up, you start recording, you realize how much you love this process, and you're back, and our listening audience could not be more thankful, right? We had a moment talking about intensives last episode. It was a little bit of an intense conversation because it involves being very intentional about your work and then doing work as a couple. And so this episode, we thought we would back up just a little bit, drop some information, maybe even in a little bit of a shorter format to say, hey, you have found these phrases to be very helpful lately in your own growth, which, by the way, let's applaud that for a second, that growth is still occurring. I know this came up in one of our previous episodes, but we're never done growing.
No,
right?
We're not.
There is no arrival, and now I really get a lot of relief with that thought. It's not that there's a destination I'm trying to reach and I'm late getting there.
Yeah.
We're all in a growth process, right?
Exactly.
So these phrases for you have been important in your growth recently. I'm so eager to hear about them, and we get to capture this on mic, which is very cool.
Oh, good. Well, Roan and I got to go to the Fallen and Free conference. It was in February this year, 2024. And it was in Jupiter, Florida, at the Sanctuary with Tully Chavikin. Did I say it right?
Chavikin. He says like the end is religion.
Oh, I like that. Okay, that helps me remember.
Right, yeah. But I think he's used to everyone messing that up.
Yeah, I'm sure.
I just call him Tully because I know I can remember that, right?
Exactly.
This guy's a wild man. Right.
Yeah.
I've never met him in person, but you have. How was that?
Yes, it was wonderful.
Yeah. Speaking of intensity, this guy's intense.
He's intense.
Right?
Yeah. He's got a lot of energy.
Yeah. Any man who's like done his own work, loved Jesus and is tattooed down to his knuckles.
I know.
I'm in.
I know. Exactly. It was such a great experience to spend 2 days in that setting.
This is an annual thing, right?
It is, and I cannot wait to go again.
That's awesome. I'm going to try to get to the next one.
Oh, you should.
Yeah.
Yes.
And this year coincided with his book release, which is, I think, going crazy. His book is going crazy, which is nice, right? For you to be that vulnerable publicly and for people to appreciate it.
I agree.
Is cool. But it's full of this kind of stuff that we're about to talk about today.
Yes, and I can't remember who said what. Steve Brown was a speaker. Nate Larkin was a speaker, and Tully. And so I'm not sure who said what, but these quotes are what have really just kind of integrated into my heart.
Nice.
And where I kind of hang out with these days, thinking about, and but here they are.
Okay.
One of them is, the road from sympathy to empathy is our own suffering.
Just kind of want to let that land for a minute, right?
Right.
So I hear the words, and initially my heart is like, gross, right? Gross. But it does sound very true. Like for someone to say, oh, I'm really sympathize with you, feels like that's from a distance.
Yes,
you know?
Right.
I can empathize with you means
I have been where you are.
Yeah. We need to have a conversation over here. Yes. I've got some things to share with you.
Yes,
right?
yes.
And we can feel that when we're with people, right? I want to be surrounded by empathetic people.
Me too.
Not pathetic people.
Not pathetic.
And empathetic people, yeah.
Yes. Yeah. So that's really, it's helped me see the gift of my own suffering.
Oh, beautiful. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
That now I do feel like I'm definitely more empathetic with others because of my own suffering.
It brings to mind that verse out of the sacred text of Christianity that God works everything together for the good. Man, has that been misused
yes,
a lot from pulpits to tell people just to get over themselves, or it's going to be fine, or the bad stuff's good too, whatever the preachers say. But the way you're describing it, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
You know, the pain in your story actually helps you to connect better with other people. Awesome.
Exactly, yeah.
That's very well said.
Yes.
Congratulations, whoever
Said
that.
it. Yeah, I thought it was awesome. Another one is the law. The law is for the hard-hearted, and grace is for the brokenhearted.
So that's a little bit of a religion attack.
Yeah.
I'm okay with that. You're okay with that?
I'm totally I'm okay with that. Totally, because I was of the law.
Okay, I was about to ask, why is this so important to you? Yeah. Okay.
Because I was very black and white, and I was of the law.
Okay.
Which now I realize it made me more hard-hearted towards others and judgmental, right?
Yeah.
But grace, when I experience somebody brokenhearted, or they're really beginning to own their brokenness.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Now I have so much grace for that.
Yeah. Yeah, that's beautiful. I grew up inside of the church, and there's so many great things about it. And I'm not even saying this is their fault. It may have been mine. But confusing those two things, law and grace, or that I only have grace so that I can be better at the law. That was my translation. And man, did I give it a great shot until all hell broke loose and it didn't work out anymore. But the people who are brokenhearted, I think that's what they're looking for, is grace.
Right.
A plan, as we've discussed on previous episodes, I need a plan, but that plan needs to be grace-filled. It doesn't need to be you measure up to this or else, right?
Exactly.
And that's what we often hand to other people. That's really well said. Is this whole list this way?
Somewhat.
Wow.
Yes,
that's
somewhat.
great.
And even I know in my own relationship, and I'm going to say in my marriage, my own relationship in my marriage, when Roan comes to me with maybe some hard news, but he comes with kind of remorse, or a contrite heart.
Yeah.
Like, I can have grace for that.
Yeah, that's easier to match.
That is, definitely. Okay, so another one is shame is rooted in fear.
Shame is rooted in fear. Okay, so shame is the result of, or like grows out of, or?
I think because if people know me, if they really know me, they're not going to love me.
I see.
They're not going to accept me.
Okay.
So shame is what, hiding. I'm going to hide because I have shame. I'm not going to let you really know me, because the shame is what's keeping me rooted away from you.
That makes a lot of sense. It is the fear of rejection.
Yes.
Man.
Yes.
Yeah. Did you have that? Have you had that? The
Absolutely.
Fear of no. Really?
Yes. I think we all have a level of that, I think.
Okay. Yeah.
I think a lot of people have. Maybe not Roan.
We'll have to, next episode I'll hit him with that
quote. Please.
Yeah.
I shouldn't even bring his name. He's not here to defend himself.
That's right.
Yeah,
well, it does feel very tribal though, doesn't it?
And I will say that's a wrong statement, because I know that he doesn't want to be rejected either.
Yeah.
Nobody
does.
Nobody does.
If you send us out of the village, we're going to starve to death, right?
Exactly,
so we have to do what it takes to fit in. But it doesn't feel like, though, I almost said solve, but I think that's a bad word. To address our shame, we have to address fear.
Right.
I see a lot of people that are trying to do their work around shame. We never talk about what they're afraid of. But that's a big question inside of our communities, right? What are you afraid of?
What are you afraid of?
What are you afraid of, right?
Yeah.
And if you go changing that question, by the way, what are you afraid of? You completely change the answer if you change the question. So to push away from that, I think is a really, really bad idea. And some communities are doing this because we don't want to confess fear and those sorts of things. But I believe that just creates a place for shame to exist without it being addressed. I think that could be an entire episode, actually. Shame and fear and how those two things operate together. Yeah. Powerful quote.
Powerful. Yeah. I know. Shame is rooted in fear. Another one, and this is the last one. Act your way into right thinking.
Act your way into right thinking.
So when you look at the addiction cycle,
yes,
this is the way it spoke to me.
Okay.
When you look at the addiction cycle, we will start and we'll draw a little cloud around above the cycle, and we will put distorted thinking there.
Okay.
Right.
That's what drops you in.
Drops you into the addictive cycle.
Okay. I see that.
But so we're trying to change the thinking in ourselves, right? To have right thinking, but we've got to act ourselves into right thinking.
Gotcha.
Or so this quote was, that's the way it spoke to me.
Yeah. Yeah. It's kind of like, it feels a little bit like dress for the job you want, not the job you have, right?
Right.
There's some things I've got to change in my life.
Yes.
In order for my thinking to change as well.
Yeah.
Right. If,
right.
I find this one really interesting because I see so many, and I'll just pick on men because I am one, but I see so many men that are like, you know what's going to fix this? I'm going to change spouses. That's what's going to fix this. Because there's a woman on Facebook that, man, that was electric, and it didn't feel like this.
That's right. Yeah.
So I'm gonna change my spouse, right? Yes. Or I'm gonna, so there's certain sort of actions that you put in place, but they have to be healthy, right? Because you can have different actions that are actually joining along with that broken part and only exaggerating it, right?
Yes.
But there is, and this gets back, I think, to the community piece that we talk about so often.
Right.
How do I know which actions are going to change my thinking in a good way, which are going to change in a bad way? I have to be willing to sit in a group, and man, I love when this, and I assume this happens in the women's groups as well, when a guy's talking about something and a guy across the circle who's usually just a little bit older is able to say, that's a terrible idea, right? We don't give advice here, but I can tell you when I did that, this is the way that it ended up.
Yes, right.
Yeah, that's beautiful. All of those are very intriguing for me, but I have just a personal question, if you don't mind.
Sure.
Like, which one for you is just, man, that is gold. That's the thing that's going to help me over the next couple of weeks really grow. Is there one that stands out the most?
Gosh, I think maybe the road from sympathy to empathy is our own suffering was the one that stood out to me the most.
Yeah.
Because it helped me make sense of my own suffering. Right? Yeah. That what the gift was to me.
I love that phrase that you just used right there. Not to blow past the fact that you chose that one, but the fact that it helps something that made a little bit of sense. I mean, you'd done some work around that already,
right? Sure.
But it helped it make even more sense. Yeah.
Just in that statement, right? Exactly. Also, to have empathy for my story, my own story, instead of sympathy, because to me, sympathy can easily put someone in a victim mindset.
Okay.
But empathy is like, of course. No kidding. Why that affected you.
Yeah.
No kidding.
So being able to say that to yourself.
To yourself.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, there's a lot packed in that, isn't there? To be able to say to yourself, hey, that makes sense.
Yeah.
That makes sense,
that
right?
makes sense.
I love when I can see those moments happen between two people, but the way you're describing it just feels even better. That I can be in a moment or in a circumstance, and I can have a reaction or a feeling or even be tempted to go back to an old costly coping mechanism. Right. And instead of moving into shame and judgment, I can say, wow, well, that makes sense.
That makes sense.
Based on my own story, that makes sense.
That makes sense.
For me, the one about fear and shame, obviously with how the conversation picked up, that one really grabbed me.
Did it?
Yeah. Yeah, because I have a fear-based, I don't know the clinical language to it, but I have a fear-based personality.
Because you've often said, I've heard you say that you're a counterintuitive 6 on the Enneagram.
Yeah, counterphobic.
Right? Yeah. Oh, counterphobic.
Yeah,
yes.
Counterphobic. So I'm gonna move towards that fear.
Yes.
Try to exercise some control over it. But that makes sense.
Yeah,
it makes sense. As one who was just kind of clipping along life and then gets a cancer diagnosis,
right.
It makes sense that I would have a fear-based. It was already there. Okay, so let's not blame it all on cancer. That would be easy to do. I've done a lot of work around that, but cancer only made it more real.
Right.
To think you don't ever know when that's going to happen again. When's the reoccurrence?
Yes.
And the trouble is it spills out into other areas of life. It never, the interesting thing is we talk these things out. It never really, where it's born is not where it stays the rest of its life. It moves out into all these other areas.
Yes.
Man, somebody's got to contain this, right?
Yeah, right.
But being able to explain these things, and I think we could say today, even just having some verbiage around it to be able to share with other people.
Right.
The exercise that we've done today, I think would be great inside of a group environment.
I do too.
To say, hey, these phrases or this phrase, that's a way to be vulnerable without saying, let me tell you about the house I grew up in.
Right, exactly.
Because that can be a little frightening, right?
Yeah.
So a good place to start, and but you're not at the beginning of your work.
No.
A good place to pick up just with current. It's the reason why I wanted to have this conversation today behind the mic is because I think there's this fallacy that we can just disclose or share or talk about us 15 years ago or 15 months ago. You would say,
isn't that the truth?
Yeah, you and I would say that's not a good idea. We need to talk about those things, but we've got to reveal in the now.
Right. What are we struggling with today?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And the way that you've talked about it today is not even just what you're struggling with, but what strikes you. And that tells you something about you. Right. Tells me something about you. Right.
Yeah.
And the fact that my close second, by the way, was the religious thing.
The law. Yeah. The law is for the hard-hearted and grace is for the brokenhearted.
Yeah. I have to be honest and say, with you, though, I've been both. And I'm not super proud of the law guy.
Oh, no, me neither.
I like to hide that guy a lot.
Yeah, I like to hide her too. She's not attractive.
Yeah, unfortunately, there's a lot of recordings out there of me being a pastor and kind of losing my way in some things. So doing some work to try to accept that part of my growth process is a little difficult, but this has been a really interesting exercise to just take these phrases that feel a little bit benign, almost like social media like, and saying, whoa, these actually have power if I stop and think about them for a moment.
Yeah.
What difference could 15 minutes in conversation with another around a key phrase do for someone today?
Exactly.
I love that. We should do this more.
I know, definitely. I want to,
okay.
For sure.
You be the smart person that reads about the smart things. I'll just sit behind the microphone and talk about it. How about that? Roan has trained me well.
Well, I'm glad that, with me, I feel like you get to talk more.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah. I have space to be me when you're here.
You do. And you have a lot to share.
There you go.
It's such good stuff.
There you go.
Great
All right.
stuff.
Okay, well, hopefully you guys have enjoyed these phrases, and do this for us. If you have one that's important to you, reach out.
Yes,
send us a
let
message.
Us know.
Yeah,
We'd
let us
love
know.
To know.
Hop on, rate the podcast, and then say, hey, this is one of my phrases. Yes. And maybe in a future episode, we can kick Roan out again, and you and I can do this with
that listener. Would be awesome.
With listener phrases. That would be cool. Let's give it a shot.
All right, let's do it.
To learn more about what you've heard today and to engage with the Sex, God, and Chaos team, visit sexgodchaos.com.